People say children don't understand power. But that day, a 12-year-old black girl made a white mayor forget how to breathe. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carved through the courtroom air like a blade. And when she said what she said, even the chandeliers seemed to tremble. Her name was Kendra Ellison. She came from the South Side where the roads cracked like broken promises and streetlights flickered more often than they shone. Her mother worked nights cleaning office buildings that spit her out like dirt tracked onto carpet. Her father, a former mechanic turned ghost, left when she was 5. The city never looked down her street unless it needed a scapegoat or a photo op. Mayor Richard Callaway had been in office for 13 years. 13 years of ribbon cuttings, charity galas, and quietly ignoring every statistic that didn't favor the northern districts. 13 years of letting South Side schools decay, of watching black and brown children drop out, disappear, or die. But no one expected that it would be a girl barely 5 feet tall, with beads clicking in her braids who would shake the foundation of his rule. It started at the city's annual Youth Voice Forum, a PR stunt wrapped in false hope. Students from every district were invited to speak at City Hall. Most were coached, polished, and pre-approved. Kendra? She wasn't even supposed to be there. Her teacher, Ms. Parker, slipped her name in at the last minute, sick of watching her brightest student ignored. The mayor smiled wide when he saw her step up to the podium. That smile people like him were like armor. Charming, safe, detached. Go ahead, young lady, he said. The city's listening. She didn't flinch, didn't shuffle her notes or clear her throat. I know your secret, she said. 3 seconds of silence followed, but they felt like thunder rolling in the distance. Callaway's face twitched. Excuse me. You heard me, Kendra replied. Her hands were steady. You think people don't pay attention, but I do. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a manila folder, the edges frayed and stained with pencil lead. I have copies, she said. All of it. The land transfers. The payments. The name you signed over and over again. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Your office sold the Southside Park to a development company 3 years ago, she continued. Then bought it back for twice the price after it was declared unsafe and abandoned. Except the company you sold it to doesn't exist. It's a shell, owned by a trust. And that trust. She held up a paper. Your wife is listed as the sole beneficiary. Now people were standing. Her voice remained calm. Deadly. You shut down the community center for mold, but didn't fix it. Then your cousin's firm got the contract to evaluate it. You paid him 6 figures to say the building was beyond repair. Then you used that to greenlight demolition. But you didn't rebuild anything. You just fenced it up. What? Callaway's hand went to his mouth, fingers trembling slightly. Kendra pressed on. You said the South Side was too dangerous. That you were increasing police presence for safety. But we know what that means. More patrols. More arrests. More black boys gone. My brother, her voice cracked for the first time. He was arrested for walking home after dark. No charge. Just gone for 2 days. A white woman in the audience gasped. A reporter stood, camera raised. I watched you at his press conference, Kendra said, staring at the mayor. You called our community a war zone. You said you'd clean it up, but all you did was clean us out. Security began to move forward. Callaway raised a hand to stop them. You're just a child, he said quietly, almost pleading. No, she said. I'm what you're afraid of. A child who listened. A child who read every line you tried to hide. A child who remembers everything. She turned her eyes toward the council members. And I emailed you all last night. With attachments. Councilwoman Diaz opened her phone. Her eyes widened. Councilman Green stood up and said, Mayor, is this true? Callaway was sweating now. Kendra stepped down from the podium. I don't need applause, she said. I need justice. The room exploded not in cheers, but in gasps, whispers, outrage. Outside, on the steps of City Hall, reporters gathered like vultures. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust in her face. Kendra said nothing. She walked past them, past the stone lions, past the marble columns. And the silence she left behind was louder than any scream. Later that night, the mayor held a press conference. He denied everything, called it a misunderstanding, said it was all coincidental paperwork anomalies. But the people had heard the truth, and it came not from a politician, but from a girl the city never wanted to see. The next morning, someone spray-painted the front of City Hall with a single word, remember, because now they would. And Kendra Ellison, 12 years old and tired of waiting, had started something no one could stop. But fame was a double-edged sword. By Tuesday, her mother had received 2 anonymous threats on the family's voicemail. On Wednesday, someone tossed a brick through their living room window. Thursday morning, police cruisers began parking at odd hours outside their home, headlights off, engines running. Just watching. Kendra wasn't scared. Not really. But her mother was. They sat together at the kitchen table that night, in a silence thicker than molasses. "You didn't do anything wrong," her mother whispered, voice strained with fatigue. "I know. But the world don't always care what's wrong and right." "I know." Her mother stared into her coffee. "You poked the bear, baby." Kendra looked her in the eyes. "Then it shouldn't have been sleeping on us in the first place." Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. At school, things were even messier. Some students treated her like a celebrity. Others looked at her like a traitor, especially the white kids who came from the north side, bussed in through citywide programs. Teachers tried to act neutral, but neutrality always bends toward the comfortable. One afternoon, Principal Goodwin pulled her into his office. "I admire your passion," he said slowly, "but your accusations have made things very difficult for the district." "You mean for you?" she replied, folding her arms. Goodwin sighed. "You're a child. There are channels for these things. I went through your channels. I spoke. I followed the rules. And the rules were made to ignore me." He blinked, stunned by her clarity. "I just want you to be careful," he said finally. "People in power don't like being embarrassed." Kendra stood. Then maybe they should have acted like they had something to be proud of. She walked out without waiting for dismissal. Meanwhile, at City Hall, the cracks began to widen. Councilwoman Diaz, the first to respond to Kendra's emails, requested an emergency audit of all development contracts from the last 5 years. Calloway tried to block it. He failed. Public pressure was too high. News crews circled the building like flies. As the investigation deepened, more skeletons emerged. The mayor's re-election fund showed large, repeated donations from shell companies connected to construction bids. A nonprofit meant to serve Southside teens hadn't hosted a single program in over 2 years, but somehow received quarterly checks signed by Calloway's office. A whistleblower from the Parks and Recreation Department came forward, tearfully confirming that budgets were slashed deliberately to allow targeted redevelopment. Each revelation sounded like a death knell. But Calloway didn't resign. He doubled down. He called a press conference flanked by police chiefs and community pastors who owed him favors. He declared the allegations a targeted misinformation campaign. He accused radical educators of exploiting children. He even had the audacity to say, "Young people should stay in school and leave government to those with experience." Kendra watched the broadcast on her cracked iPad. She laughed once. Then she began to write again. This time, it wasn't just a speech. It was a full report, annotated, sourced, and footnoted. Every detail cross-referenced. She sent it to the city council, every local news outlet, the Department of Justice, and 2 major newspapers. She titled it "The Price of Silence: A Youth Perspective on Institutional Theft." 3 days later, the Washington Post ran a headline: 12-year-old exposes corruption web in small southern city. And then the real wolves came. A private investigator showed up at their door pretending to be from Child Protective Services. Her mother kicked him off the porch. An old photo surfaced online, doctored to make Kendra look like she was holding a stolen phone. A blog accused her of being manipulated by activist groups with socialist agendas. Conservative talk shows called her a pawn of liberal educators who hate America. But with every lie, more people came to her side. Her teacher, Ms. Parker, stood firm. She organized a student press conference at the local library, where Kendra spoke again, this time alongside other Southside youth who told their own stories of over-policing, evictions, food insecurity, broken promises. Their voices braided into a single roar. A protest followed. 300 students marched from the South Side to City Hall. Signs read, "We are the city too, and fund our future, not your pockets." Kendra led them, braids bouncing, eyes fierce. She didn't chant. She just walked. That same week, 2 council members flipped. They called for the mayor's resignation publicly. A third one, Councilman Green, was caught shredding documents in his office after hours. Surveillance footage leaked. He was forced to resign. The mayor's house was vandalized, red paint splashed across his white porch. Not by Kendra, not by protesters, but by someone angrier. She condemned the action immediately, tweeting, "We don't fight fire with fire. We fight fire with facts." Her tweet was retweeted over 90,000 times. And still, through all of it, she remained a child. She still did homework, still walked her neighbor's dog on weekends, still helped her little cousin braid her hair on Sundays before church. But each time she stepped outside, eyes followed her, admiring, doubting, hoping, fearing. One night, her mother came into her room and sat at the edge of her bed. "They're talking about inviting you to speak in D.C., she said. "Some education summit." Kendra nodded. "I heard." Her mother hesitated. "You sure this is what you want?" Kendra looked up. "No," she admitted. "I never wanted this. I just wanted them to stop pretending we're invisible." Her mother kissed her forehead. "Baby," she whispered, "you made the whole country look." The mayor filed a lawsuit against Kendra and Ms. Parker claiming defamation, seeking $250,000 in damages. His lawyers said the allegations were slanderous fabrications. The city was stunned. Who sues a 12-year-old? But it worked. For a moment, fear rippled through the movement. Parents pulled kids from protest planning. Teachers stopped replying to emails. Ms. Parker was suspended, pending investigation. And Kendra? She went quiet. 2 days passed. 3. Then, on the 4th day, she walked into the public library with a new folder. This one thicker than the last. Reporters crowded the steps. She didn't speak to them. She sat down in the same community room where she first gave her speech and streamed live again. This time, she showed video evidence. Recorded Zoom meetings between city officials and private developers. Leaked emails with date-stamped attachments. A voice memo of Councilman Green saying, "Nobody cares what happens in the South Side unless someone dies." When she finished, she said only this: "If you're going to sue me for telling the truth." The video got 6 million views in 2 days. The lawsuit was quietly dropped the next week. And the mayor? The mayor was now under federal investigation. But Kendra didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. Because she knew this was never just about him. It was about the system that let him rise, stay, and fall only when a little girl made too much noise to ignore. The city began to fracture quietly, at first. Behind the marble walls of City Hall, doors that once opened to backroom deals now closed with a hollow finality. Callaway's allies peeled away like dying leaves. Funders withdrew. Church leaders who once stood beside him in photo ops issued carefully worded statements. "We are saddened by recent revelations," they said. "We believe in integrity." But Kendra wasn't waiting for apologies. She didn't trust them. She was already doing the work. She started showing up to town halls, flanked by other students from the South Side. They sat in the front row, notebooks in hand. They asked questions city council members couldn't answer without stammering. They demanded budget transparency, police oversight, repairs to schools that hadn't been painted since the Clinton administration, a food co-op to replace the shuttered grocery store 2 blocks from Kendra's house. She didn't just tear the house down. She was helping rebuild it. And it wasn't without cost. Ms. Parker remained suspended. Her case dragged on while the district reviewed her conduct. She lost half her salary. Her benefits were cut. But still, every Thursday night, she opened her living room to students who wanted to help Kendra research, read, and organize. The living room became a war room. Maps, spreadsheets, case law printouts, kids eating peanut butter sandwiches while debating zoning ordinances. One evening, a boy named Tyrone leaned back in his chair and asked, "Why us, though? Why do we gotta be the ones fixing everything?" Kendra paused. Then she said, "Because if we wait for them to do it, we'll die waiting." They didn't ask again. Meanwhile, the investigation into Mayor Callaway picked up steam. FBI agents entered City Hall under the guise of routine administrative cooperation, but everyone knew what it meant. Boxes came out. Computers were seized. 2 aides resigned in 48 hours. One of them tried to claim political persecution. The other quietly turned state's witness. The city council voted to strip the mayor of several executive powers. He fought it, filed injunctions, claimed character assassination by a child. But nothing could stop the landslide, and still would not resign. That's when the protests turned permanent. For 31 days straight, the steps of City Hall became a living camp. Tents, drums, speeches. College students joined. Clergy. Even a few retired city workers who'd seen enough. They named it the People's Hall. Kendra came every weekend. She didn't sleep there, her mother wouldn't allow it, but she came during the day. She brought water, supplies, books. One day, she set up a folding table and called it the youth desk. Anyone under 18 could come and ask questions about city budgets, housing, policing, and get answers from her and her crew. She printed out mini-zines titled How the City Really Works and handed them out like flyers. She was building a generation that refused to be lied to. But still, Calloway clung to power like a barnacle to the hull of a sinking ship. Until one morning, just after dawn, a knock came at the Ellison door. Kendra opened it. It was Ms. Parker, her eyes wide, her hands trembling slightly. "Turn on the TV," she said. Kendra ran to the living room and flipped the screen on. Breaking news. Mayor Richard Calloway arrested on federal corruption charges. It felt surreal. There he was, surrounded by agents in dark suits, being led out of his historic colonial home in handcuffs. His white button-down shirt looked wrinkled. His mouth moved like he was trying to explain something. But the microphones were gone now. The podiums were silent. Kendra just stared. Her mother came in from the hallway, blinking sleep from her eyes. "It's over," she whispered. Kendra shook her head. "No," she said. "It's just the beginning." Because she understood something that most of the city still didn't. This wasn't just about one man. It was about how many people let him rise. About the machinery behind him. The invisible gears turning in boardrooms, banks, and bureaucracies. And if you stop turning one gear but ignore the rest, the machine keeps moving. So she kept working. A week after the mayor's arrest, the city council voted to hold a special election. For the first time, candidates were being pressed on issues like South Side development, education equity, and police accountability. And everyone knew whoever they elected next, it would be under the watchful eyes of Kendra Ellison and her growing coalition. She was invited to appear on national TV shows. She declined most of them. "TV loves heroes," she told Ms. Parker. "But I'm not a hero. I'm a kid with a folder." But she did accept one invitation. A panel at the National Youth Civic Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. She wore a secondhand blazer and clean sneakers. She didn't smile for cameras. But when she spoke, the entire hall leaned forward. "I wasn't born to save my city," she told them. "I was born in a city that forgot how to save itself. I just reminded it how." The audience gave her a standing ovation. She didn't cry, but Ms. Parker did. Back in her neighborhood, the community center once left to rot was finally approved for renovation. The new blueprint included a library, a tech lab, and a youth advisory board that Kendra was invited to join. She said yes, but only if they gave 5 other students equal seats. She understood. One voice is too easy to silence. But 5, 10, 100? That's a choir. And she wanted a city that could finally hear itself sing. Months passed. Fall came. And with it came peace, not the kind that comes from quiet, but the kind born from clarity. At school, Kendra was back in class. She didn't get special treatment. She didn't want it. She still had algebra homework. Still had to run the mile in gym class. Still snuck notes to her best friend, Aisha, about which cafeteria cookie was least like cardboard. But the hallways had changed. People nodded to her now, not out of fame, but out of respect. And when younger students saw her, they whispered, "That's her." Not the girl who tore down a mayor, but the girl who made City Hall fall silent so the truth could finally be heard. Winter came to the city like a slow exhale, gray skies, salted roads, and the kind of chill that seeps into your bones if you stand still too long. But the movement Kendra started didn't stop. It changed shape, spread roots. What began as outrage became organization. What started as a protest became a policy platform. People began showing up not just to march, but to vote, to speak, to rebuild. Kendra watched it all with a quiet intensity. She had stopped trying to control the fire. Now she just tended it. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a year after the youth forum where it all began, she stood at the center of a community block party in the South Side, the first one the city had funded in years. The once fenced-off park had been cleaned, reopened, repainted. There was music, the smell of grilled corn and hot dogs, and laughter, real, unafraid laughter. She saw little kids running barefoot through the grass. She saw old men playing chess on the new benches. She saw her mother dancing near the speakers with an energy Kendra hadn't seen since she was 8 years old. This was what healing looked like. Not headlines, not courtroom victories, but this. Life blooming where once there was only concrete and silence. Councilwoman Diaz approached her, holding a plate of ribs and sweet potato fries. You know they're still asking if you'll run for office one day, Diaz said with a smile. Kendra raised an eyebrow. I'm 13. Doesn't mean you can't start planning. Kendra looked out over the park. I don't want a seat at the table, she said. I want to build a new table. One where people don't have to fight to sit down. Diaz nodded thoughtfully. Then I hope I get to serve at your table someday. But for now, Kendra didn't care about political futures. She cared about the now. She turned and joined a circle of kids painting a mural along the edge of the basketball court. Bright reds, oranges, greens, hands reaching toward each other, toward books, trees, microphones, balance scales. In the center, painted by a sixth grader named Jules, was a girl standing in front of a courthouse, her back straight, her arm raised not in defiance, but in declaration. This one's you, Jules whispered. Kendra smiled. No, that one's all of us. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings against Calloway moved slowly. He denied everything, of course, blamed bureaucratic errors and misguided subordinates, claimed victimhood. But the documents didn't lie. The testimonies didn't waver. The audits didn't bend. Eventually, a jury found him guilty of misuse of public funds, wire fraud, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Some people cheered. Others said it wasn't enough. But Kendra? She didn't celebrate his fall. I didn't want revenge, she told a local news reporter. I wanted accountability. And now I want reform. Her words became a soundbite again, replayed on national media. But by now, the spotlight didn't scare her. She wore it like armor, shining only when needed. As spring approached, she returned to school life with focus. Science fairs, history presentations, a failed attempt at learning guitar. She laughed more. She dreamed more. But she never stopped listening. One afternoon, as she walked home from school, a boy from her block no more than 10 years old ran up to her, breathless. Miss Kendra, I told my teacher today about the broken heater at school. I told her, if Kendra Ellison can fix the mayor, y'all can fix a radiator. Kendra burst out laughing. What did she say? She just blinked real slow and said, well, I suppose you have a point. He grinned, teeth missing in the front. Then he ran off again, arms swinging like airplane wings. That night, Kendra opened her journal, something she hadn't touched in weeks. She didn't write about policies, corruption, or speeches. She just wrote one sentence. When we stop being afraid to speak, the silence has no power anymore. She closed the journal and looked out her window. The city glowed under a soft, amber sky. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was surviving it. She felt like she belonged to it. She felt like it might finally, one day, belong to her too. Years passed. The city changed slowly, then faster. New leadership took root. Budgets were rebalanced. The South Side saw new investments, a youth mental health center, after-school art programs, bike lanes that connected rather than divided. Kendra's mural still stood faded by sun and time, but untouched by graffiti. No one dared paint over it. At 17, Kendra co-founded the South Side Civic Youth Coalition. It trained high school students on city budgeting, public policy, and organizing. It grew from 15 members to hundreds, then spread to nearby towns. She got a full scholarship to Howard University, majored in public policy, minored in journalism, interned with a senator, refused every corporate offer that came with a silencing clause. And through it all, she never let them call her a savior. Because saviors live in myths. She lived in a neighborhood, one filled with loud voices, broken systems, fierce love, and people who wanted better not just for themselves, but for each other. On the 5th anniversary of her first speech at City Hall, she returned not as a guest, not as a politician, but as herself. The mayor, Councilwoman Diaz, now holding that office, handed her the microphone at a youth event. The crowd quieted. Kendra took a deep breath. She looked around the room and saw new faces. Young ones, old ones, black, brown, white, Muslim, queer, immigrant, disabled, people who never used to be in these rooms. I don't need to tell you a story today, she said, because you already know it. You've lived it. You are it. You know what happens when one voice tells the truth. But what happens when 1,000 do? She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. I'll tell you. They don't just listen. They change. They move. And they remember. Her words didn't roar. They bloomed. Afterward, someone asked her if she'd ever thought about running for office now that she was old enough. Kendra smiled. I'm not running, she said. I'm walking. And if you want to come with me, grab your shoes. The room erupted in applause. But Kendra didn't bask in it. She stepped down from the podium and walked outside into the city she helped wake up. A girl once told the mayor she knew his secret. Now, the whole city knew itself. And there was no going back to sleep. The end. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.